It is indeed a great honor and privilege to address this inaugural session of the International Forum of Supporters of the Fight Against Modern Practices of Neocolonialism. Allow me to thank His Excellency Dmitry Medvedev for facilitating and hosting this crucial meeting of the International Alliance of Political Parties and Social Forces in the fight against modern practices of neocolonialism. This forum is taking place during a decisive stage of our journey, which is aptly captured in our theme for the freedom of nations, which must serve as a beacon to all progressive political parties and social forces gathered here today. The concept of neocolonialism has attracted much political attention due to the multitude of different forms of dependence and interference in the present international environment. A closer look at the operations of neocolonial forces indicate that mechanisms being applied are aimed at promoting Western hegemony, which remains embedded in the global order. Its application remains subtle, multiple, and vary from one situation to another, depending on the essence of their draconian goals and objectives. The existence of ongoing influence of the former colonial powers and other Western powers continue to persist even after independence, and in many cases is responsible for the excessive exploitation of developing countries' resources, which does not improve the welfare of the local people. Unsurprisingly, these modern forms of neocolonialism have inhibited independent political policymaking among developing countries to decide their own destiny. Moreover, a part of the neo-colonial strategy involved political interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states. Some of these methods include support of certain political leaders and organizations by Western institutions or bodies in elections via direct payments, manipulation of the population via global media platforms in favor of the preferred party, and manipulation of the elections. The activities of such groups like the International Republican Institute and the National Democratic Institute come being the driving forces and architects. In essence, these institutions and other international non-governmental organizations are front organizations created by Western powers to serve dubious causes such as undermining the efforts of governments deemed hostile to Western hegemonic designs. In other words, these organizations are merchants of the regime change agenda. Other forms of interference include violation of countries' sovereignty under the cover of advancing human rights and democracy. Libya and Iraq are some of the recent casualties of these neo-colonial practices. An instructive example of these worrying developments is the practice of weaponizing human rights. The phenomenon of weaponizing human rights flies in the face of the sacred principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, which are enshrined in the United Nations Charter. These norms concerning human rights are becoming stronger, and yet they are problematic and disturbing and tantamount to interference by one state in another internal affairs in direct disregard of the dictates of international law. It is important to bear in mind that economic instruments have become the key tools of choice among neo-colonial forces in their quest for total dominance in our globe. For that reason, the fiercest struggle to be waged against neo-colonialism is in the economic realm. By drawing countries and their citizens into tighter economic networks across borders, the liberal global economy opened opportunities for hostile, powerful states to employ negative economic statecraft against target states. It is therefore not surprising that powerful Western states have become the most prolific practitioners of economic sanctions. As we have seen time and again, the United States and its partners have been weaponizing illegal economic sanctions in direct disregard of the dictates of the international law. The main purpose of these sanctions is to influence the domestic or international behavior of target states. In some cases, sanctions are intended to effect regime change in a target state. My country, Zimbabwe, Russia, China, Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela are some of the countries that have been victims of Western-inspired sanctions and other forms of economic coercion or punishment. Quite disturbing is the USA, which has recently hatched plans to impose punitive piece of legislation against South Africa after the latter had won its case against Israel at the International Court of Justice against the genocide attacks that is perpetrated against Palestinian people who are innocent in the Gaza Strip. Such double standards and bullish behavior displayed by these so-called apostles of democracy and human rights has no place in a modern society. Let us channel our collective energies towards challenging this Western approach of using a variety of economic instruments to achieve hegemonic political objectives and preach dialogue that promotes peace in the world. Moreover, the West has mostly envisioned and drafted international laws governing commerce, capital, and property rights in order to counteract the influence of Western countries in global institutions. Members of the international community should demand institutional reforms that would more equitably represent their best interests. Alternatively, member states should join emerging global institutions like BRICS, aimed at equality and respect of freedom of choice of partners and development trajectory. The emerging development of the data-driven capitalist system is a continuity of earlier imperialist exploitative tendencies. Many of these Western multinational firms benefit from private data that they collect from across the globe, compromising the digital integrity of governments in the global south, thus imitating previous forms of colonial resource exploitation. This new practice of neocolonialism has made it hard for developing countries' economies to build their own digital economy by consigning them to the periphery of the digital governance architecture. As a result, developed countries, particularly from the West, continue to conceptualize global digital society norms and policy principles predicated on their strategic priorities and perspectives. If this trend continues unabated, many countries will be forced to depend on digital technology, which is globally coordinated, cooperates, owned, and controlled and prone to monopolies, mostly domiciled in the United States. These digital networks, as the emerging conscience of our communities, will eventually connect and thereby manage all fields and facets of our societies. With this in mind, the emerging digital order is a critical geo-economic and socio-political problem that require our immediate response. In view of the foregoing, it is therefore important for our international forum to present a serious challenge to these structures and manifestations generated by neo-colonial forces After all, the fact that neocolonial methods are less direct and less visible renders neocolonialism more dangerous than colonialism. As we gather at this historic meeting, we thus express our commitment to what our forum stands for, as encapsulated in the international appeal by the organizing committee of the Forum of Supporters of the Fight Against Modern Practices of Neocolonialism. The proposals contained in the international appeal of this forum will consolidate the efforts of all socio-political forces in counteracting destructive and hostile neo-colonial practices. ZANU-PF is a party of principles, a dependable friend and ally. Please take back our message of solidarity and reassurance to your respective political parties and organizations. We are determined to play our part in the worldwide struggle for the complete defeat of neocolonialism and its equally evil twin, neo-imperialism. I thank you for your kind audience.